Welcome to the Bold Dreams Held Loosely podcast. My name is Taryn Watts, and in this episode, I am joined by my co-host, Michelle and Erin Mitchell, a dear friend of the show and the MRA's editor and copywriter. Erin also happens to be my cousin and the smartest human being I know. Living a life of sobriety, she has inspired Michelle and I to get really curious about our own dependencies. We start this conversation off talking about alcohol, but then later we start to explore other dependencies like social media and shopping, caffeine, and even cannabis. Erin brings a wealth of wisdom and knowledge in the inner mechanics and workings of the way our bodies actually interact with substances. And she also talks about her own journey of sobriety and how it led her to the ultimate expression of trust in herself. This is truly a sobering conversation and one that could possibly activate or trigger you. It certainly evoked some really uncomfortable feelings and emotions within me. And after being with them and sitting with them, it has truly changed my relationship to substances going forward. So we invite you to lean into this conversation with a mindset of openness and curiosity. We're calling this episode Sober Curiosity. We hope you enjoy.
Erin, thank you so much for making the trek in a snowstorm. Like, how long did it take you to get here?
An hour and 10 minutes.
Yeah. Okay.
Part of that was getting lost.
Yeah.
Part of that was GPS thinking that all streets were drivable in the winter in the country. And as it turns out, I got to a turn and it was like, summer maintenance only. Now a field of snow. Best wishes, turn around. Just like, okay. But
yeah,
it is worth it to be out here because this feels like a very womb-like, secure, safe space. So it's a perfect place to have this kind of conversation.
a womb-like.
I love that so much.
For those of you who don't know, this is Michelle's home. This is where she lives. This is her living room. This is a real gorgeous library behind us. And it does feel like a womb.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Warm but spacious. Like this.
Perfect to have this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So when Michelle and I were talking about the conversations we wanted to have this season, we knew we wanted to have a conversation with you.
Yes.
You are the smartest, most brilliant, most well-spoken, most well-written, most educated human I know.
No contest.
Right? And this topic in particular on being sober curious and sobriety is something that through my conversations with you, you planted a little seed that very slowly started to take roots and is starting to sprout. And I want to learn more. And Michelle wants to learn more. And we're really excited to have this talk with you.
That is excellent. I'm so excited to talk about it because I'm very passionate about sober curiosity. As of today, and for reference, we're filming in March, I am 19 months sober. And it actually feels a bit strange to count because that's such a thing associated with like proper recovery, alcoholism, like taking it day by day. I reflected on it as part of the context of this discussion, but otherwise, I hardly ever think about it. It's just become part of my life. So it is not a counting days, white knuckling, notch on the prison wall of one more day down. So I love talking about this. It has been life-changing and also incredibly subtle. I really like that it planted a seed for you because it is strange to me now that alcohol is something that we just take for granted. It's presupposed. You go out for dinner, you assume everyone's going to have a drink. If someone doesn't have a drink, it's, oh, are you on antibiotics or are you pregnant? It's
right, yeah.
Is there not a third option? So it is a disservice to people that it's just the default that you're going to drink. So it's like, maybe we could talk about other options, other routes. So I love that more people are talking about it. It's obviously coming up a lot now because the CCSA, which is the Canadian the Centre on Substance Abuse, talked about it being very dangerous because of cancers. It's a class 1 carcinogen. You're increasing your risk of breast cancer, obviously colorectal, liver cancers, mouth cancer, esophageal cancer, liver disease, stroke, heart. So
It goes
there's
on and on and on and on.
there's a lot of physical dangers. So they came out with new recommendations in January that said, technically no amount is safe. If you must, you can have 2 drinks a week. And those drinks should be about 5 ounces of wine, which is literally like a capful. It's so small. It's so paltry when they say 2 drinks.
It went from what to 2?
They used to say 4 to 5. And every country has different standards.
Okay.
The Netherlands, I think, currently says none. England's really tricksy, and they say units, which is really difficult. It's meant to transcend wine or lager or strong cider or straight alcohol. So they're trying to give a standard that applies to every kind of alcohol. But it means you're doing a butt ton of math. And I don't know if I want to be at the pub being like, okay, I've had 150 milliliters, which translates to 6.3 units, which means I can have one more. So it's crazy. So this is a huge reduction in what they have said is safe. And some of the feedback has been that that's very confronting for people, that they're saying, so what are you telling me if I have more than 2 drinks a week? And frankly, most people who drink have more than 2 drinks a week, especially in that small of a dose. So it opens the door to people being like, number one, is it even worth it if I can only have 2 small glasses? And, okay, tell me more about this risk. So, I'm going to have a sip of water.
Yeah.
There are those physical risks, the illnesses that come along with it. But I do want to caveat that there are risks with everything in life, especially the good things. It's very scary and buzzy to say it's a class 1 carcinogen, but a lot of stuff is. Processed meat. If you have bacon or deli turkey, it is technically, to be a class 1 carcinogen simply means that there is a demonstrable link to cancer in humans.
Oh my. Deli meat?
Sure, because it's full of nitrates. Yeah. So when you really think about it, pregnancy is such an interesting litmus test. It's like, if you can't have it when you're pregnant, it is because it is not optimal for your body. So I do want to say that I think it's wrong to scare people out of drinking by saying, like, it's going to give you cancer, you're going to have a stroke, whatever. I think it is good to know about the potential risk of anything that you eat, drink, do. If you choose to fly, if you drive a car, everything has risks. You go out in the sun, which we all do. So we just need to be able to make an informed decision.
Yeah.
The difficulty with making an informed decision when it comes to alcohol is how quickly alcohol interrupts your brain functioning. And it's not just in the moment of being drunk and not making a good decision. As little as 1 drink ruins or shifts the dopamine balance in your brain. So the second you have a drink, it's giving off this hormone that your brain creates, this neurotransmitter, sorry, I should say, not a hormone. It's releasing dopamine, which is, it feels great. We mistakenly sometimes call it the pleasure neurotransmitter or the pleasure chemical, but it's actually the motivation chemical. It's you get pleasure from a thing to encourage you to do it again. So it's traditionally been associated with, it's the feeling you get from sex, it's the feeling you get from food, it's the feeling you get from anything that you need to do to live and to further the human species. So that made a lot of sense to need this motivation when it was difficult to survive, when it was difficult to find food. We needed this like hyper responsive neurocircuitry. So if you could introduce dopamine into your system, great. Now we live like a very dopamine rich life, you know, going out and hunting and gathering and ordering Uber Eats are on 2 very different levels. So you don't need this level of dopamine. And when you're introducing it, your brain is saying like, we want homeostasis, we want balance. So if you introduce pleasure, your brain's job is to introduce pain. It's the hangover, but it's also the emotional hangover, you know?
It's the booze blues.
The booze blues. And it's shocking to me that I was probably about 20 before I heard the term booze blues. And that people don't talk about it frequently. I wish more people told me like, I feel kind of sad today because I had wine.
Mhm.
Like, okay, so it's not just me, because I do feel sad after I've had some wine. And it's not the morose in my cups, I love you so much, while I'm drunk. It's the next day a feeling of dysphoria, like a flatness, a lack of engagement, heightened anxiety, and that's all a legitimate brain response. So there's nothing wrong with you if that's how you feel after you've had a few drinks. That means your brain is working and alcohol is working. Everything's doing its job properly. They just probably shouldn't be together. So, dopamine gets spiked from having the alcohol. Your brain responds by lowering its production of dopamine. So now you're out of balance. You are left with low dopamine, and you're like, "Ooh, you know what I need? I need more dopamine. I would like to help come back to balance," because not many of us have the patience to wait for homeostasis to naturally occur. I think it's something like 80 hours before the chemical effects are out of your brain. And if you are a semi-regular drinker, and
Wow.
yeah, if you're a semi-regular drinker, and I'm not talking about like, oh, I have 4 drinks every day. If you're like a few times a week having a drink, it is a month before your brain has homeostasis again. It's one of the reasons why a dry month is such a landmark figure that so many people attempt and so many people point to. That is how long you need before your brain is operating the way it's supposed to. I love the idea of people doing a dry month, and that's how I got into this sobriety, that I would take a month off drinking. And by the end of the month, you're feeling really good because your brain is leveled out. You're producing dopamine naturally. Your GABA and your serotonin, which are 2 of the other neurotransmitters we'll maybe talk about a little bit down the line, they've sorted themselves out. Everything is working like it should. You are letting your brain be in charge of brain chemicals instead of you being like, oh no, don't worry about it. I got this. I got some dopamine in a glass for us. Like, we'll be fine.
It's delicious.
The issue is that people then get to the end of the month and they're like, I feel great. So I guess I can drink again.
Right.
Like, my depression's gone, my anxiety's gone, so I'm fine. I can drink again. It's like, oh gosh. Well, I guess we didn't really learn a lesson. It's interesting that in general, the distance between alcohol and its positive consequences and alcohol and its negative consequences, it varies so much that it's hard for our brains to really come to terms with the fact that it's hurting us, because we have a sip, within 15 minutes, you're lighting up like a little Christmas tree, right? You're getting all the happy feelings, you're getting all the feel-good chemicals. It's, maybe 6 hours later, things are wearing off. But if you've continued to have some sips, have some drinks, we're pushing that mark out. So maybe it's tomorrow morning when you wake up and you feel bad. But, your brain's not necessarily drawing the dotted line between those 2 things. It knows alcohol, immediate happy, ... Time passes, other things happen, I don't feel great. Maybe it's something else, Maybe it's something I ate. Maybe I had a bad sleep. And you did because you drank. So. So.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay. I'm so you just told us a little bit about this started for you with a month. Taking a month. Okay, can you just tell us a little bit about your journey to sobriety, because it's different. This is not you being an alcoholic, or would you?
Oh my God, no.
Right?
Absolutely not.
And so this is not like people had an intervention with you and were like, Erin, you need to stop drinking. Like, this is a problem. It's affecting your daily functioning. This was a very intentional choice on your behalf to stop drinking.
It absolutely was.
Can you tell us about that journey? Because I feel like a lot of people are going to be able to see themselves in your journey.
I would love that.
Yeah.
So I've done a number of sober months, and my first one would probably have been 5 years ago. Had a sober month, felt great. Awesome, I can go back to drinking. That person I made fun of earlier, that's me.
Yeah.
It was like, okay, I know I can do it. It's kind of a good gauge of like, do I have a drinking problem? No, I don't. I, without a problem, gave up drinking. It's not the only sign of do you have a drinking problem, but it's a very reassuring thing to be able to do. And then I worked at a bar. I love wine. Oh my God, it tastes good.
Wine,
It tastes good.
it's the most delicious thing I've ever tasted in my whole life. Like I just,
Really?
guys, I love the taste of wine.
It tastes good. It feels good. It has celebratory connotations.
Yes.
It's got an elegance about it.
Yep.
It makes you feel sophisticated. It's the way you know you're an adult.
It's also, to me, like it's a ritual. It's like 4:00. I'm about to start dinner. Pour myself it's like my day is. It's like a ritual. And yeah, yes. Keep going. Please keep going.
I do want to come back to that.
Yeah.
So can we
Yes.
asterisk that?
Yes.
Because that's a very important part of what you're going to lose
Yeah.
and what you're going to have to replace. So I would do month off, few months on, month off. Then I went like a couple of months off, but I would always start drinking again. And every time I started drinking again, it felt crappier because my body had gotten used to like, oh, I had 4 months off.
Right.
And I went on vacations. I had birthdays. I had anniversaries. I had Christmases, holidays, New Year's Eve sober. So there was no threshold I hadn't crossed other than having a sober month and knowing it was going to be followed by another and another and another in perpetuity. So there is a way that you give up drinking for a month and you're sort of just like, okay, well, next month I'm going to drink. So it's almost like you're offloading it. In any sort of like quit lit or recovery circle, that's called being a dry drunk. It means that what you're doing is not drinking, but you're not addressing anything about why you drink, why you want to drink, why you should or shouldn't drink. You're not doing any of the inner work. So I was in New York with my husband and my brother, and that was the last time I had a drink. It was August 11th. And I had like 3 glasses of rosé. It was stinking hot in New York. We were out on this beautiful patio. I had these glasses of wine. Magical night. Everything was wonderful. And I woke up in the middle of the night because, of course, you got that 3 a.m. wake up that like happens to everyone because your blood sugar is dipping. It was artificially inflated. Now it's dipping, so you're awake. And I just was like, I want to go home. I don't want to be here. It's like, I'm sorry. You're in New York City. You're in this amazing metropolis. There's so much to do and see, but I just had that like deep dysphoria of like, I don't want to be here. I don't feel great. And like, wasn't even a hangover. It was 3 glasses of wine. And that was a real tipping point for me of being like, that's pretty crappy. I'm like a little bit cheating myself of some small pleasures. So then I said like, okay, you know what? Let's just say no more wine. Let's just put it away. We can take it back out of the closet in 6 months, but we're not going to put a time limit on this for now. So let's really pursue it. So for context, I am very type A. I am an overachiever. Alcohol had not negatively impacted me in terms of like, I never missed a 6 a.m. spin class. I never got in trouble at work. I would never have called in sick, anything like that. Like I was keeping on. If anything, I probably experienced reverse interventions of people being like, you sure you want to give up drinking? Like, do you remember drinking though? It's fun. So this definitely didn't come from outside. It came from within. And another related tipping point for me was shortly before that experience in New York, my doctor told me I had to give up gluten. And it turned out, yeah, I was gluten intolerant as hell. So that was heartbreaking. I love gluten. You know what we said about wine? Croissants, donuts, proper bagels, real pasta, proper pizza. Anyway, it's amazing. Gluten is one of the great joys of life. I didn't think twice though. It's bad for your body. Oh my God. Like my body doesn't want to have gluten. It's not making me feel good. I have not had a slip. And when I realized how clear cut that was for me with gluten, I was like, why haven't you been doing this for yourself with alcohol then? You know it's not helping you. You know it makes you feel not 100%. You have years of anecdotal evidence now where you've taken a month off, you've taken 2, you've taken 4 months off, and you have felt great. And this makes you feel not great. not in a drastic way, but nor does gluten when you're gluten intolerant. Like I wasn't dying. I just was like, my tummy hurts. Like I have headaches. My mood's low. It didn't feel like a sacrifice to give up something that I loved. If it was a way of loving myself more, it was taking care of myself more. So when I realized how easily I could do that with gluten and how black and white that felt, that flipped the switch for me with alcohol, that I thought like, you are more than capable of living without it. So you need to start exploring like, what role was alcohol playing for you? What's going to be hard to give up? And how are you going to live without it? Because we need to accept like, it's not serving us. So like truly stomach upset was probably the closest I came to an intervention. So it has been a fantastic, fantastic experience. I sleep better for sure. Those 3 a.m. wake ups, I cannot stress enough. And the more I talk to people about them, the more people relate to that. That they say like, yeah, I know that wake up. You had 1 glass of wine too many, and sometimes 1 glass of wine too many is 2 glasses of wine total. You know, it's the like, oh, like I can't sleep, like I'm agitated. It's being a little bit irritable the next morning. It's recognizing it's a thing that's not helping you, even if it's not aggressively hurting you. So that's been incredible. I am substantially happier in like a very calm and steady way. But I can't just brush over 18 months of getting from there to here. So I had to do a surprising amount of self-examination, which I really resisted. Not because I don't like thinking about things, but because I don't know if all women feel like this, but it's as if paying a lot of attention to our moods is irrational and self-indulgent. You know, that it's like, oh, you don't feel good and you want to think more about how you don't feel good and how to make yourself feel good. Okay, diva. It's like, is that not what I do for literally every other person in my life?
Yeah.
All of the time? So like, let's pay a bit of attention here. You would think living in your own body and living in your own mind, you just immediately know, automatically know what you need. No, it's as much work as it is with anyone else. Possibly my favorite analogy. I can't say that. I'm going to use so many analogies. I'm terrible. When you're raising kids, you learn to monitor their moods, right? Like, you know, like this kid's getting a little, he's getting edgy, he's getting sulky.
Angry.
Yeah, whatever it is, right? They need to eat, they need a nap, they had a bad night, they're overstimulated, they're understimulated. And it's almost like it's running in the background of your mind constantly, right?
Fair.
You need to start doing that for yourself. And just constant self-evaluations. And it's wild that we do it for others and don't consider it for ourselves. And it's been eye-opening. So one thing I got really into was using a feelings wheel, which I don't know if you've ever seen one of these. Yes. So for anyone listening who doesn't have one, you start with an inner circle of 7 basic emotions. You've got like happy, sad, angry, bad, fearful, 2 others that sound like the dwarves. So we'll just, each of those categories then gets broken down into 4 to 7 subcategories, and each of those get further broken down, right? So you get extremely granular.
Yeah.
So helpful. So instead of just being like, I feel bad. Okay.
What's underneath that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What kind of bad?
Yeah.
And okay, perfect. Now what kind of that kind of bad?
Yeah.
And why don't we take a targeted approach to that? Because alcohol as a solution should not be a panacea. It shouldn't be, you know what fixes every problem for every person? Having a drink. Like, nothing fixes every problem for every person. So it's like, okay, you know what? To anyone who wants to keep a little bit of alcohol in their life, not a problem. Like, I'm not going to tell you can't. Maybe just have other tools in your toolkit and know that there are some roots on those feelings wheels that should not be addressed with alcohol. You know, if what you're feeling is stress, alcohol should not be the solution. If what you're feeling is lonely, alcohol shouldn't be the solution. If what you're feeling is tired, overwhelmed, understimulated, overstimulated, rejected alcohol shouldn't be a solution to one of those things. So that I loved. That helped give me a guideline for, okay, so now what do I need? We need more in the toolkit. So then I learned some breath work. I learned how to do box breathing of 4 in and hold for 4, release for 4, hold for 4. I learned the ones with a longer exhale to help down regulate your nervous system. Okay, bring some calm. I, from the beginning, gave myself permission to like, do you want to have a drink? Not a problem. But we're going to set a timer for 30 minutes, okay? And we're going to do one of our other things. We're going to start with like something immediate and down regulating. I'm going to do some of these like butterfly taps.
Mm-hmm.
Or we're going to do the deep breathing. We're going to do a guided meditation. We're just going to lay on the floor and think about our body. Just feel things and be okay with that. 10 minutes. If you're ready for level 2, okay, we're going to go for a little walk. Or it's great to have like a comfort TV show that you go to. Okay, we're going to watch one episode of something. Okay. Or I'm going to read a chapter. That is a very easy solution for me, but it's not for everyone, because if your brain is having difficulty focusing, or if you're overstimulated, or just dysphoric in general, and you're not like a deep reader, then it might not engage you. So you start with the gentler things. And 9 times out of 10, by the time that alarm goes off 30 minutes in, what is this alarm for? Like, why is this noise going off? Because it's just a thing that we reach for to shift a mood. And that's great. Definitely shift moods. Recognize that you're in a mood that you don't like, but you actually have to feel it, don't you? You have to identify what the mood is. You can't just have this, okay, we're going to stop that mood. No, let's solve it. Whatever emotion I'm feeling isn't the problem. It's just data for me. So it's like, it's the smoke detector. It's not the fire.
Right.
So taking the batteries out of the smoke detector, yeah, it reduces the stimuli, but it does not get rid of your problem. So yeah, I could pour a glass of wine and my stress level would immediately go down, because it's having a sedative effect on me and it's giving me a dopamine spike. I feel better. Has anything substantially changed? Nope. Am I going to have this same feeling as soon as this wine wears off? Yep. And sometimes you're feeling emotionally provoked in response to something that needs to be resolved. So I just strongly recommend everyone make themselves more of a priority. Get in touch with what's making you feel anything. So to your point about one of the values of wine being that 4 o'clock glass as a sedative, as a transition.
It's transition.
Yeah. Part of it is just ritualistic, right?
Yeah, it is for sure. Yeah.
So I have found that replacing that 4 o'clock ritual with something else is really helpful. So like I normally go for a walk at the end of my workday. So that's it. I log off. That would be the time that I would normally like, okay, pour a glass of wine, start making dinner. I say, okay, I'm going to go for a walk. And it gives you that same sense of like, okay, the day is over, the night has begun. Or even just, I have taken to using sparkling water and I made it my special drink. You know, you just have to give something the designation of being special and it can serve that purpose. The problem is that some of us really have too much on the go. It's one of the, I'm very fortunate that I can say, oh, my workday's done. I'm going to take 45 minutes and go for a walk. Like, I don't have anyone to feed. I have one person to feed, but I meal prep and he can sort himself out. And he's an adult, listeners. My child is 33. So that's luxury. I have space. Yeah. I have a wide toolkit of things that are like costly and time costly too. So I don't want to say to people like, oh, well, what I do is I just leave my house and walk to the yoga studio and go to yoga for an hour. And it's like, well, I have children to feed. I have, you know, we've got practices. I'm working 2 jobs. So I've got a job tonight. So it's one of the reasons I think there's such a like prevalent mommy wine culture now. That it's like, you know what we have for you? We have a type of self-care that is passive and that you can engage in while doing something for other people. So, do you know what I mean? Like, oh yeah, this is my thing. I'm gonna have a glass of wine. Are you gonna stop making dinner? Are you gonna not be correcting homework? Is it still bath time? Are you doing story time? So it's like, oh, have we given you much of a boon if it's like, here's a little something for you while you still continue to do things for other people? That can't be the solution, right? So I really have difficulty with mommy wine culture because of that it's like, is mommy wine culture existing because moms need to have less on their plate because they're simultaneously overstimulated and understimulated? That they have to do mundane, routine things. You know, when the kids are young, it's very like, oh, we're going to read Goodnight Moon again. Fantastic. Wonder what the cow says this time. But you're also like, you're just engaged enough in it. It's not like you could be doing something else, you know? You can't be like, all right, we got your book and we got my book. So it takes all your time, but doesn't necessarily fulfill you 100%. And apparently we just make jokes about mommy juice now instead of being like, hey, it must be really tough to be a mom, to feel like you have so much to do and also that you don't get to do enough. So the closest I think the average person could come to understanding it, the average person, is if there aren't more than 4 mothers in the world. Anyway, you know, during the pandemic, people self-reported an increase like 36% in alcohol consumption. And a lot of the reasons that people drank: loneliness, isolation, boredom, stress, worry, insomnia. Okay, I think everyone felt all of those things probably at the same time. You know, you were just like overstimulated, listening to the news, like what's going to happen, uncertainty. And then you were also like locked down alone, so isolated, but also probably locked down with other people. So you're like, I feel so lonely and also trapped with these humans. And it was like this process of being hyperstimulated and incredibly bored all at once. And I spoke to both my mom and your mom about it. And my mom was like, yes, that is what early motherhood is. You have absolutely no time to do anything, but also you never do anything. So I wonder what would be a good transition from day to night for a mom. Like that wasn't a passive co-occurring ritual. Like, is there a thing that you could do that would take the place of that 4 o'clock glass of wine? And there's time constraints, and I get that. So I'm actually curious. Like, what do you think you would replace it with if you stopped having the 4 o'clock glass of wine?
Well, I'm so interested to hear what you have to say. Yeah.
There's a, you know, the whole thing about, well, can't stop feeding them, can't stop doing this, can't stop doing that, have to do this. I was in that loop for a while, but now my brain's like, why can't you? Yes, maybe I can. I think that there are more constraints we can break free from than we initially realize. And I feel like it's been so rewarding to release the things I thought I had to do and to prioritize myself over others. So far it's working just fine in all the places I've done it. And so, you know, even on those days, I think you're good at this in a lot of ways when you're talking about boundaries for your kids. There's lots of nights where I have hungry, cranky children. And if I'm feeling stressed, I do say, you all have to wait, and I am going for a walk in the woods. And there are children, and they're a little older now. And so maybe it's not like, I'm not leaving a 2-year-old toddler running around to get hurt, but can't we maybe just say, sorry guys, Mommy needs her walk, and no, you can't come with me.
Yeah.
Yeah. or I don't feel like making dinner actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or this is what I feel like making for dinner. Or I have a long drive in the morning to take my kids to school. And I was telling Taryn about this the other day. Actually, I don't feel like taking you to school today. The world didn't end. We had a lovely day. I didn't feel like making lunches, didn't feel like taking them to school. We stayed home. We read some books. We read a shark book. They painted by themselves. I laid around, did what I wanted. The world didn't end. Yeah, that's...
Yeah.
The world doesn't actually end if you do put yourself first.
But we feel like it does,
Yes.
right?
And then
Yeah.
maybe when we're using wine as like, when we take, I should speak for myself. So I've had it interesting. Let me back up. So you've planted this seed. So let me even back up even more. I am part Italian. The other side of my family is Italian. I know you know this, but I'm just context. Okay. And wine is like, it's just juice. It's like, this is like it's part of pasta and wine and bread.
It's
like,
it's cultural. It's part
cultural.
of your heritage.
It absolutely. It's like wine it feels like it's in my blood. Like, and for a very long time, that's what at 4:00 in our family home, my dad would open up the bottle of wine and we'd have wine and dinner all as a family. And it was like my happy place. And so, being in my own house, like I carried that tradition into my own house, into my own family. And I can't remember when it was, but my dad just like abruptly stopped one day. He was getting really into, and I know you know this, but he was getting really into Buddhism and meditation. And I think he was really examining habits and the habitualness of some of, the habits of that 4:00 wine. And why did he need that 4:00 wine? He didn't struggle with alcoholism, but it was just this thing he was examining. I think it was just this challenge he gave himself. And then he just never drank again. And I was kind of like, when that happened, I was like, what the hell is happening? Like, what? It felt like it was like something was changing. And I didn't get it until very, very recently. And I'll tell you a moment. You've planted this seed. I guess I've been like very quietly sober curious. You talk about it, and I was like, but I don't have a problem. I don't have a problem. I am a very high functioning human. Since the pandemic, yes, I can definitely tell that my wine consumption has gone off. It went up to every night I was having a glass of wine. Every night at 4:00 I was now pouring a glass of wine. And I was like, okay, it's the pandemic, but it didn't end after the pandemic. But you've planted this little seed that was like very quietly growing. And I had this moment of awakening, a realization that, oh shit, there's something here. And it finally clicked why my dad examined this habit. Like it finally, everything was starting to finally click. And it was this moment. We were in Hawaii not too long ago, and we had gotten in, it was like a 24-hour voyage. We'd gotten into Maui, and we were all up at 3 a.m. because of the time difference. And we had gotten in the night before, so we had no groceries in our condo. And so we're all up at 3 a.m. Maui time, and we're like, okay, let's get to the safe. Like, let's just go do groceries. Let's stock up our condo so that we're up. We need to do something. And so Sean and I and the kids, we go to the Safeway, and it's a 24-hour Safeway. And we walk in, and the first section I book it to is the wine section. And here I am. Sean's like still parking the car. I've got the 2 kids with me, and I am literally holding 4 bottles of wine like this, like carrying it like a child in my hand. And I'm walking around. We're trying to find a cart. I'm like, we're walking around, and the manager comes out to me and he says, ma'am, you can't buy alcohol till 6 a.m. It was this moment of shame and like, not that he was shaming me, but it was this moment of, the next thought that went through my head was, well, damn, like, Sean's going to have to come back here before 4 p.m. to come get these bottles, and we just made a trip out here. And I was like, oh my gosh. I thought about this before I thought about food. Maybe there is a problem. Maybe I associate that 4 p.m. glass of wine with calm, with a ritual, with like a deep exhale, like the day is over. Not the day, it's like a transition from day to like chill, relax, fun time. And it was a moment of like true clarity. And so since then, I have stopped drinking wine during the week, and I will have 1 4-ounce glass on the weekend, on Friday and Saturdays. And I'm noticing now, because I'm noticing how different I feel. Before it was kind of like, I didn't notice it because it was so subtle. I didn't notice the dips. I didn't notice, it was just like a subtle decline, very, very, very subtle. And now I notice it. I notice what it does to me. I notice how I feel in the morning. I'm seeing it clearer. And I notice, when I think about how I feel in the day is really important to me. How I think in the day, some of my favorite practices, like my journaling practice in the morning, when I'm like tapping into like my visions and like my gratitude, I can tap into that so much deeper with a clear mind than I can if I've had just 1 glass of wine the night before. And I never, ever noticed that before.
When I gave up gluten and it was so glorious and I felt so much better, and a question a lot of people asked me was, how did you not know that you had a problem with gluten? Well, I was always having gluten.
Yeah.
I needed to completely cut it out before I could see like, I'm capable of feeling this way. Because it is things that creep up on you like that, the graduals. You get acclimated in tiny little degrees, and you go from here to here just by going one little bit. So it does slip in. I love that your dad, for me, was my first introduction to wine, and also my first introduction to giving up wine without having even remotely a problem with wine. And what your dad had a problem with was needing anything.
Right.
And that is a beautiful cornerstone of Buddhist philosophy, that there's no room for grasping. There's no room. The secret to happiness is wanting less and less and less. The less you can want, the better, because otherwise you're just on the hedonic treadmill, right? You need something, you fulfill that need. It's no longer satisfying almost immediately, that's your new baseline. Now you need a new thing. You constantly need more drug of choice, more stimulus, more money, more spending, more thing. You need to force yourself in the other direction to say, it's not about fulfilling my needs, it's about needing much less. And you're right, like, it's been so freeing for your dad that he doesn't need to worry about it. And I think there's absolutely room for moderation for some people. There isn't room for moderation for me because it takes up too much bandwidth, because then I have to decide what's moderate.
Okay, so that's interesting.
Yeah. So there's a couple of issues that I have with moderation, which is that this Erin, who we're going to call sober Erin, can decide to have a drink and know that like 1 drink is fine. It is in alignment with a lot of things. This is a conscious decision. Do you know who's deciding to have the 2nd drink, though? Isn't sober Erin. It's 1 drink Erin. And she's like, I have some thoughts. That first drink was delicious. We should have a 2nd drink. She doesn't share my priorities and my values 100%. She is like a palimpsest of me. She's like an impression of me, just slightly. She's just outside me, like my aura, like as if someone did a photocopy of me and then shifted it a little bit. So she's not
I love that visual.
She's not quite lined up with me. So she's making a different decision. And she's like, you know what? No, for sure. But like it's Friday. We can sleep in tomorrow. We don't have kids.
Yeah.
You know, we'll get up at 8, we'll do yoga. Like, oh, I already got groceries. We're doing great. So you can have a second glass of wine. It's Friday. You're young-ish. So I have the second glass of wine. Now, 2-drink Erin is like, girl, do I have an idea for us? It's a 3rd drink. Let's do that. So this is the other issue. And so it ended up just being too grimy and cumbersome that I felt like I wasn't treating myself to a glass of wine. I was depriving myself of a second glass of wine. You know, the pleasure of having poured that glass and enjoying it and savoring it, while that was real, it was not worth having to then start exerting discipline and saying like, no, I'm not going to have a second glass. And if one glass is okay, why can you not have a second? Or if you have wine on Friday night, well, why wouldn't you have wine on Saturday night? What's different about today? And before you know it, you've become habituated, and also you've started associating it with, okay, well, it's the weekend, so I can have my wine. It's like, so are the weekdays terrible? Are the days that I can't have wine then days that I am exerting discipline and depriving myself? And so I couldn't live in that mentality of like, oh, I'll limit it. And it's like, look, you either look at this as a treat that you can have in moderation, or you look at this as something that isn't a treat because it's not serving you. And that is the way that I had to take it. And it was taking up a lot of bandwidth of being like, okay, can I have a drink this week? Should I have a drink this week? Thinking about it, I'm like, do you want to just save yourself some time? Let's just never drink. Let's just take it right out of the equation. And it honestly saves a ton of time. All my mental bandwidth now is like, okay, let's read a book. Let's learn something. Let's do something. Instead of being like, should I have a drink with dinner? And like my moderation months are kind of miserable, you know? So moderation did not work for me because it felt like a battle between indulgence and discipline. And I prefer consistency, as it turns out. Because every logical reason for moderating meant that having absolutely nothing was truly the gift, right? All the reasons that it was like, well, why can't I have a second glass of wine? If I'm having this conversation with myself, well, because like it's not going to make you feel great tomorrow, and you're not going to sleep so well, and it's like you're gonna get a little bit of booze blues, and like you're gonna underperform in spin class or like whatever. Then it was like, well, why did we have that first glass then, you idiot? Like if there are consequences to having another glass, why did we even have the first one? That just cleaned things up for me.
There's something so empowering about that. It's like what you just said is you weren't tiptoeing and just dancing around in some middle ground. You invited yourself to fully own, is this good for me or is this not good for me? And finally just come to what was true for you instead of delaying, making that not even a choice, just coming to what was clearly true.
Yeah.
I like that.
It's it does people such a disservice to have this idea of like, are you an alcoholic? Like, I'm not an alcoholic. And you don't have to be an alcoholic to stop drinking. And you could have a problem with alcohol without it having any of these traditional, like, you know, we have this stereotype of like, you're drinking from a brand bottle, it's marked XXX, you got moonshine, you're risking blindness, you've probably got a DUI, your kids have for sure been taken away, you've gotten fired again, you know, like, and I live downtown Ottawa, so I see bad decisions made incarnate. So it would be super easy for me to be like, listen, I just worked a 10-hour day, I went to a yoga class, I'm crushing my life, I made a delicious meal, I'm doing fine compared to these people. Why would that ever be my standard, right? It should never be like, oh, it's not really hurting me. The standard I'm trying to apply to everything in my life is it helping me? Is it serving me? Truly. If I approached my romantic partnership with the same standards that I had brought to wine of like, well, you know, like he's not mean to me. And, you know, it's got to be like, how are you making my life better than it would be without you? And it just, as it turned out, was not in alignment with me. And it was really difficult to overcome the stigma. And when you give up drinking, people are like,
Yeah.
so you're an alcoholic then? Like, you can't drink? I'm like, newsflash, you probably can't drink either, FYI. So, like, no, I like to think I'm just, a little further down a road that maybe a lot of people are on.
Okay, so I just want to, so something that Michelle and I were kind of talking a little bit about before you got here, we were like, okay, we're talking about alcohol, but there are other things. And we were talking about, drug use, marijuana use, that's becoming, it's legalized in Canada now. It's becoming more and more socially acceptable. And it's like, and we were just, I don't think there's a clear-cut answer to any of this. It's such a nuanced discussion, but I'm curious what your thoughts are. Or maybe, do you want to share a little bit about your experience?
Yeah.
What you were kind of saying earlier?
Yeah. Okay, so for me, I pretty much don't drink, and not like I don't drink. It's just that even one glass of wine, I don't feel good. And I have like a shorter distance, that distance you're talking about from feeling good to when you don't feel good. I have a headache, like before you know it, my body says, no, it's not good for you. It's very clear. Pretty much don't drink. Same with my partner. He really loves to have good workouts in the morning. That's his priority. It's never really worth it to drink. So when you're saying all these things, and when I'm thinking about this, I have no resistance in my body to not drinking. I'm like, yes. And I've experienced those little moments of being at like Christmas, Thanksgiving. Do you want a glass of wine? No, thanks. Why not? Have fun. No, thanks. And then the internal, am I being weird? Should I just relax a little? I don't know. So I've had all of that. I feel very comfortable, clear, and sure that alcohol doesn't make my life better, doesn't make me happy, There are other things for me that I do love and I do use. Multiple other things. And as we were getting ready for this conversation, I was like, am I going to leave this conversation realizing that those things need to go too? Because I am, when you said what purpose is alcohol serving? And you're talking about the ritual.
Yeah.
I see myself with going to smoke a joint, walking in the woods. I see myself there with those things. So if I'm having a feeling, I probably do a little bit of internal feeling wheel where I think, what is this feeling? And I still sometimes go walk in the woods and I go smoke a joint, or have a gummy, or have CBD or something, right? It's a substance that I'm taking to make me feel better, or as a part of a ritual. Okay, so that's one thing. So it's like there's many substances, but then it keeps going, like my caffeine, sometimes I have melatonin at night. I love the feeling sometimes when I need a good night's sleep and I take a melatonin and I know I'm going to be really sleepy. I consume all sorts of substances that I'm using to assist me to do something, right? So in some ways, as you're talking, I'm getting more clear. There's some things I'm realizing, I'm having an inkling that some of these things aren't serving me. And if I pay more attention to them, they probably should go the direction of alcohol for you. And there's other things where I'm like, wow, if I had to choose right now, gut feeling, are these things negatively impacting me or not? I think I actually could keep them. They might be things that actually, maybe it needs more investigation if there's like if they're impacting negatively, but maybe it's like, maybe they're okay. Maybe they're not okay.
An interesting part of the investigation should be asking yourself, if I say, okay, I'm not going to do this for a month, do you have like a clench, a panic? Is it like, don't take it from me?
Coffee gives me that.
Coffee gives me that
Yeah.
too.
That makes me panic. I've given it up before. It was very hard.
Very.
Yeah,
I hear
hard.
you. Yeah.
And it came back and I feel myself gripping, like it's scary to let go of, but my gut is like, Is caffeine really good for me? No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. And I loved that Taryn's dad brought a Buddhist approach to it, because from the Buddhist approach to non-attachment, you shouldn't feel that way about anything.
Yeah.
I mean, some Buddhist practitioners get creepy with it. Like they say, like, when you're tucking your children in at night, think in your head, you might die tonight, child. And but they want you to have that level of non-attachment. Like you would do anything you could to save your child, but that you are aware that you are limited to you, and the things outside of you are inherently outside of your control, and you need to be able to put any of them down in a heartbeat. I mean, obviously, when you're talking about other human beings, it's grotesque. It's a very aggressive stance. But it is true that it should be of any substance. And I've read a whole bunch of books about this, because that is how I approach everything in life. And two doctors and authors come to mind. Gabor Mate, who's Canadian.
We'll find him on
Yeah,
here.
I bet he's up there. And Anna Lemke, who wrote Dopamine Nation, which is about the things that we do to give ourselves these dopamine highs. Both of them really relate to their clients because they have an addiction of their own. And my first knee-jerk reaction was to be like, you are a dumb idiot wanker. Because like Gabor Mate is saying like, well, I'm pretty addicted to buying classical music CDs. And I'm like, oh yeah? Does that help the heroin addicts when you share that with them? That you're like, oh, this is my third back concerto of the week. How is your dime bag? You shot up with puddle water, but I too am going to need a new CD rack. And it's like, this isn't comparable. And Anna Lemke talks about, she got really addicted to reading romance novels on her Kindle at night. And I was just like, do your patients hate you when you say this? And I just have this like aggressive resistance. But once I sat with it more, I was like, oh, thank you. You are destigmatizing the drug of choice and saying the issue is the choice. It's anything that you use habitually, anything that you can't just put down and walk away from. You got to examine that. You should be in charge of your life, right? Like if you feel even remotely compelled to do something, if something's become habitual, or if you are not 100% the decider, and we know when we're not 100% the decider, right? Like even the Netflix feeling of like the next episode 30 playing, like, oh, do I have to turn that off and I need to exercise this bit of self-control? Like, so Anna Lemke talks about modern life being drugified. So everything is hyper available, hyper palatable. And now that I've gotten over my initial anger at her comparing romance novels to heroin use, I do understand. Oh, fantastic. It's anything you turn to. You know, we're talking cannabis use, alcohol, I want to say proper drugs, like hard drugs.
Social
media, television, video games, sex, food, shopping, anything that you do because it like gives you a little okay, that's got the capacity to be addictive. Anything that gives you the that means it's releasing dopamine, and that means you could get addicted. You could develop a little imbalance and rely on that thing to give you the bump back up. So it's true of absolutely everything.
Yeah. You're putting something together for me, and this is like a random thing. I didn't think it was connected, but I'm realizing it is. I decided to give myself, it started with a winter of not buying anything, and it's felt so good. I've actually extended it until my birthday in June. And there was something about making that decision where instead of deciding for every purchase, do I need it? Do I not? Am I being restrictive, or am I living in lack, not buying it? Making the decision and never having to think about it has felt so good. And I think there's a little bit, although by no means would I've considered myself like addicted to shopping, just like in little bits of distraction. Ooh, a shirt. Ooh, this. Ooh, I don't know. Not doing it has felt so good, and I want to keep it going. So I think that exists in me, a little bit of shopping. There was times where I had to take apps off my phone. Like a couple of years ago, I couldn't get off Instagram. And I would realize I'd be like a zombie, and I'd be like, oh, it's open again. Here I am again. I had to take it off. And taking things completely away does feel so good sometimes.
It really does.
Yeah.
And I think we're doing ourselves a disservice if we're saying like, oh, like I have a problem with shopping, or like, oh, I have a problem with social media. It's like, look, give yourself a pass. The entire world, all of capitalism, it's an attention economy. It is geared towards making you want to give your time, your eyeballs, your minutes, your clicks, your dollars to something. It is all designed to be really enticing and give you dopamine. It's how they pick the colors. Like I work in marketing, so I know that like we are trying to make buying make you feel good.
Mm-hmm.
And then you'll keep buying. So it is totally normal that even if it's just like, oh, a shirt, like, ooh, and it does make you feel good.
Mm-hmm.
That we need to seek the good elsewhere, and it is like so freeing, right? When it's not even a conversation, because I've also had those conversations of like, well, where's this coming from? It's like, am I living in a scarcity mindset? Like, am I being fearful? Why am I so restrictive? Like, one thing that I liked alcohol for was that it gave me permission to do certain things. This makes it sound like I'm going to say table dancing, but it gave me permission to rest, and it gave me permission to eat, which is, those were really, I didn't realize that I had a little bit of a problem with food until I stopped drinking.
Wow.
So I am constantly participating in self-monitoring. I'm always like, okay, what are you eating? What are you doing? I have externalized so much of my view of myself. I'm all proprioception and no interoception. It's all about like, where am I in relation to the world? How am I being perceived? Like, how much space am I taking up? Like, how am I interfering with others? What do people think about what I'm doing? And food was kind of a weird part of that for me, that like, I like had these standard body image issues that like every girl ever always has. I shouldn't even say girl, woman. It's part of being female. You know what? I think it's probably quite part of being male too. I think we all struggle with that. But so I like struggled a little bit with eating disorders, just in terms of like a little bit of restriction, a little bit of anorexia. And when I had drinks, it's kind of like, okay, well, there's no rules now, you know, and I don't want to like over stress that and say like, oh, I was binging or anything like that. It's just, it is a great example of how I was so rigid. I was so type A. I was so perfectionist about everything. And if I had a glass of wine, it's like, well, like we're just going to order pizza. It's fine. I'm like, that shouldn't be a big thing. That shouldn't be a thing that I need like liquid courage for. It should be like, yeah, let's have some pizza. That's a super normal life choice to make. Or like, hey, do you want to take the night off of doing stuff? Do you want to not accomplish anything? Sit with that. Is that really what you want to do? How are you going to feel about it tomorrow? Perfect. Then do it. You don't need to have a glass of wine to give yourself this excuse. So that was an interesting thing that I learned about myself, that I was just trying to give myself permission to do what I wanted. And then I remembered, you are a woman in her 30s. You already have permission to do what you want. If you feel like you need to introduce an external factor to give you permission, we got to re-examine that. Like, what is stopping you from doing what you want? So that's been incredibly freeing too. I feel like I'm being way more honest with myself all the time because wine's not getting in the way. That I really am paying attention to what I want in every nuance. And I'm walking all the way through the like, how's it going to make me feel? Even sugar has been an interesting one.
Oof. You tell me more.
Yeah. So I don't know how you guys do with sugar. I love it. I do not appreciate people like, oh, sugar it's more addictive than cocaine. You know, I'm like, please don't say that. I know I have no interest in cocaine. I'm very interested in sugar. But I have gotten enough space now and like taken time off from eating sugar, for instance, reintroduce sugar. And I can see that, ooh, it doesn't always make me feel great. There are next day repercussions, and I will still occasionally have sugar, but I'm very intentional about it. And I do hope that's where people get with alcohol as well. Even if you decide to keep it in your life, be intentional about it. Know that like, okay. It's got the same like interaction with your brain chemistry. It's got the same like ooh, very quick pick me up, and there's a bit of a crash that comes with it too. And I'm just trying to. It's interesting that I'm talking about trying to give up sugar, but I was also talking about wanting to give myself unconditional permission to eat without having wine. So there's a lot of back and forth, right? To be like, well, this is one of the things that we wanted. Like you can eat what you want. It's like, okay, there's a lot of nuance to want. So what right now Erin wants, and what 2 hours from now Erin wants, and what tomorrow Erin wants, and what a month from now Erin wants, they all get a seat at the table. So now it's making me sound moderately schizophrenic, but there truly are like different pieces of you with different needs and values, and we need to reconcile those, and it's an ongoing, constant process. So what's your deal with sugar?
Oh, I think I used to be so addicted to sugar, and I would ride this roller coaster of like craving, don't have it, fight it, don't eat it. Can't help it, just eat it. Eat so much of it, feel horrible. Promise never to do it again. Like very dramatic roller coaster with sugar. I remember this one time, this lasted even into like when I was married. I remember my ex-husband telling me sugar is like more addictive than this. And the same thing, more addictive than cocaine. Horrible for you, does this. And I remember getting so angry. I was so angry, and I just thought, if my life can't have a cupcake in it, then I don't want to live it. I was angry. I really thought, like, I protected that in my mind. I protected that little addiction. And I really thought, it's not worth living if I can't have this. And then I cut sugar out for a really long time. Felt phenomenal. And ever since that point, I don't think I've ever entered into an addictive cycle with it again. And I think I had to, I think there was something around restriction that I had to temper. Food has been an issue for me too, just in general. And so now where I exist with it is little bits can exist. I think I do exist in a bit of moderation with sugar. Very little bits exist, but I really don't feel attached. I know my body is very happy with stable blood sugar. That is the biggest thing. My body is so happy with stable blood sugar, and it's never worth going off the deep end again. But I'm like realizing as we're talking, like in some ways, I think I have had a lot of addictions. And I'm wondering what you guys think about like the phrase or the idea of like an addictive personality. Because I don't know if I've never had one substance problem. Like you've said, I've never had something that's ever threatened to derail my life. But I see myself with food, sugar, coffee, smoking weed, social media. Gosh, I'm sure I could think of 5 more things that I've had weird, addictive, push-pull relationships with. And I think I think I have to very consciously navigate. I think it's just, there's something about when I'm not conscious of what's happening under the surface. I'm someone who tends towards an addiction of all sorts of things.
Do you think we all are?
Some people are definitely more than others.
Yeah.
Some people are more susceptible.
Yeah.
Some people feel that dopamine spike quicker.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think even modern neuroscience has debunked the idea of like, oh, you're just genetically predisposed to have a problem with alcohol or you're not. They're like, no, this is how all human brains work.
Mm-hmm.
There are some people who are going to have a higher susceptibility for whatever reason. But no, it is just the nature of the human brain, and it is sorry.
Is there like the addiction gene? Is there does it run in families? Is it nature versus nurture? Like, what's the modern research on that?
It's funny because the people who nature you are also the people who nurture you.
Right.
So
Fair
one
enough.
of the only ways they can test for that is twins who are given up for adoption at birth. So
Okay.
they've got the same genetic predispositions, but they have two different upbringings. And that doesn't happen quite as often as you would think. As we in the scientific community would like. We would love for more people to give up their twins for adoption and Parent Trap style raise them in different homes so that we have these guinea pigs. So they absolutely, there's no consensus. There's a lot of disagreement. The brain's a magical and mysterious thing. We still don't know why we need sleep. We know that we need it, but we have no idea why.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, isn't that interesting?
Yeah, that's
So
fascinating.
and even when you think about like how recent the prevalence of MRIs and fMRIs have been, like, oh yeah, because we've only been peeping at this guy for a little while. So it's there's new stuff coming out all of the time. So even if you read something 5 years old, it's outdated now. So the idea is that nature is they call it a biopsychosocial disease, addiction, which means biopsychosocial disease,
Okay.
which means it's all of it. Bio is in its brain chemistry.
Yeah.
Social is the entire world is geared towards it, right? Like it's you associate whatever it is, whether it's sugar, cannabis, alcohol, you associate it with certain people, certain places, certain activities. It's encouraged, it's almost mandatory in some settings. And then psychologically, you develop a dependency. So it's coming at you on all fronts. And everyone is susceptible on one of those fronts. And some people are susceptible on all three. So it's every person is susceptible to addiction. It's just, what form does your addiction take? Do you know anyone who does nothing compulsively? Who would give up everything in their life?
Yeah.
No. So my partner is so conscious of like what he really makes choices. He really makes choices for himself. And he thinks I'm very neurotic and emotional. Like, he loves me, but he's just like, you make such emotional choices. Like, you don't make logical choices. He looks at me as this, and he does make choices for himself. But I'm sure if I thought about it long enough, he would have something, you know?
But, and it is possible. So it's just self-control, right? Like, it's a
Yeah.
discipline. I respect the hell out of that.
Yeah.
You know, to the fact that he doesn't drink very often. Because
Pretty much doesn't drink.
Because he likes his morning workouts.
Yeah.
Like, what a practical, pragmatic trade-off. Like, I know A leads to B and compromises C. I know that C is my value. Therefore, A, no. B, no. Like, it can be that clear cut.
He is like that. Yeah, he actually really is like that. I do think that's so attractive. He's just like so in, but it's not when I think of controlling myself, I think of this like white knuckle restrictive, like I don't like to relate to things in terms of control, but there's a different kind of control that he has, that some people have, that is so attractive to me. It's so grounded. It's so clear. There's no wavering. It's so conscious. There's just an empowered choice.
It is very attractive because it's an act of self-love, isn't it? Like, they're very clear on what they want, and then they do that thing. And if you're chosen to be part of their life, like, what a great endorsement of you to be like, you are a person who only does things that are really good for you, and you have chosen to be with me. I am genuinely good for you. Fantastic. So, I like that.
Yeah, I like it too. It makes me feel very safe. And I know that's never going to change.
Yeah.
Because it was chosen.
And chosen from a place of consideration and logic.
Mm-hmm.
I feel very safe with myself now, actually. So that's...
Tell us more about that.
Yeah, I just trust myself in a way that I didn't. I really, really feel like I feel very safe and very grateful to myself, which is a wonderful feeling in life. I don't think I had that before. Probably it's been in the last like 6 months that like what has been showing up in my gratitude journal is just like, Erin, thank you. Like even by name, I'm just like, good choices. Thank you for doing this. Like this is really good. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm so grateful for myself.
Wow.
And I do feel safe with myself in terms of, I think that I spent the time getting my mind right, getting back to homeostasis, letting my brain do what it's supposed to do so that I can now trust it. If I feel a want, I know that I have habits, abilities, and processes in place to address those wants, and that when I make a decision about them, I know it's going to be the right one because I've made the hard decision so many times that I know that I'm capable of that. So there's no concern of like, oh, you just lack self-discipline. You certainly do not. You have self-discipline for days. So if you come to the conclusion that you want something, I truly believe that you, Erin, have thought this through and you are doing what's right for us. And it's a very nice way to feel.
Wow.
So I trust myself more than anyone else in my life now, in a way that I wouldn't have said was true before. I would have maybe gone to other people with problems and like really taken their advice and thought like, well, you've got this objective view of me, or like maybe I'm just not clear. And now I'm like, no, I'm the expert on me. I have spent a lot of time doing the work, doing the journaling, doing the feelings wheel, doing the inquiry, like really paying attention and treating myself like a person who deserves to have attention paid to them in the way that I pay it to my partner, to be like, he seems a little off today. Like, I wonder why that is. And think about his week and think about, did he have a tough meeting today? Like has he been sleeping? And now I do that for me too. And I'm so glad that I do that. And I love myself now more than anyone else in my life. I'm the person I love the most. I don't know if you can get to that point when you have kids, or if it's something that we can ever acknowledge, but like I now love myself more than anyone else. And wow.
You make me just want to do
I
this.
know,
I'm like, this is the best
tearing
thing
up.
I've ever heard.
So like, I miss rosé, but there's actually really good non-alcoholic rosé. And even if there wasn't, would I ever trade this feeling? No, I couldn't go back. I've almost hamstrung myself now. Now that I know how
there's no
stable
going
I can
back.
feel, how could I,
Yeah.
you know? I remember one boyfriend ago, we did a sober month together and he got so grumpy a few weeks and I was like, what's going on? It's like, I feel way better. I'm like, like I'm just sleeping better and like my workouts are great. I'm looking swole. Like work's going really good. I'm in a better mood. I'm like, oh, I see. I'm clearly in a fantastic mood. He's like, how am I supposed to go back to drinking now? Like now that I know how I feel when I don't drink, now I'm making an informed choice and
You know too much.
yeah. And so like a month is good. 6 months is really good. And now 19 months in, it continues to get better.
Wow.
Yeah.
It like with this clarity, with this lens, with this like love and devotion to yourself, are there other, like, what else? What else have you found? Like, what else are you examining now? And like, what else have you released, or what else have you embraced?
Man, it's gonna kill me. I bumped that one. One thing is I've started a job in the interim since I gave up drinking, and it is a job I don't think I would have taken when I was drinking. And thank God, because if I took it when I was drinking, I would be drinking heavily. So I frequently have a moment of being like, thank God you didn't go work for a startup while having a glass of wine was how you unwound at the end of the day, because you would be having a very big glass every single day because there's a lot to unwind from. So I'm very grateful for that. But I changed my workout routine. I referenced that I never missed a 6 a.m. spin class. I don't spin anymore. I was not doing it for the right reasons. It was a fitness thing. It was a control thing. It was it was a physical regulation thing. I love exercise in general, but I started asking myself the question of any kind of movement. If this burned 0 calories, would I still do it? And so there were some forms of exercise that I was doing as a form of discipline for my body. They all went. The only ones that stayed were like yoga, walking, things that felt like a discipline for the mind, because you still don't always feel like getting up at 6 to go, especially in the winter. It's cold, it's dark, you want to stay in bed. But the ones that I would do if they burned 0 calories, those ones stayed. And that was a huge gain that I got just from spending more time with myself. I also deal with relationship conflict differently. I have less of it, which is fantastic. I think especially when we're a little bit younger, the number of like little squabbles and spats that you have with your partner and the wine that is drank before those, there's a pretty strong correlation and causation even. I'm very, very gentle in conflict now. I don't think I was ever terribly mean, but I'm not defensive because, again, I trust myself. So I know, like, all I'm telling you is how I feel, and I am crystal clear on how I feel. And how I feel is the only concern that should exist in a relationship. We don't justify feelings. There's no, you're right to feel this way, you're wrong to feel this way. A feeling is a feeling. And now that I really trust the origin of my feeling and my relationship with my feelings, I am so peaceful in any conflict because I'm just like, you might not agree with me. That's totally okay. I 100% agree with me. And so I'm not defensive in it. And it lets things stay like so open. It's just like, this is how I feel. And even my partner knows if I feel a certain way, there's nothing clouding that. That is a genuine reaction that I'm having. So I love that there's more honesty there. I'm honest in everything, actually, in my life. Ooh, also, I have to tell you, when you give up drinking, you get more credit in the morning. I realize now, like, I have taken one sick day at work, and I had to call in sick on a Monday morning. And I thought, like, you know, when I was drinking, I'd want to be like, it's not a hangover. Like, I swear I didn't go out hard this weekend or whatever. You know, I remember once I was sick the day after St. Patrick's Day, and again, not a hangover, but there's this, like, the optics are not good. So the optics of like the Monday morning calling sick to work, and now I'm just like, oh, I am beyond reproach. Like, my integrity cannot be questioned. No one would think for a second. And do you know what? It's possible that no one would have thought before, but I would have questioned myself.
Yeah.
I would have felt
Goes
like,
back to you trusting yourself. Yeah.
absolutely. So now I feel like I assume other people trust me. I assume that other people recognize that I have integrity because I am convinced I have integrity. I'm not at all ashamed of myself at all on any level anymore. And I cannot believe that I got there
Wow.
because shame felt like
Yeah.
a part of the human condition. I thought I would never get rid of that. I thought we all just lived with that, like a little tiny bit of shame. The panic of like a phone ringing and like either it's your mom's name and you're like, oh my God, am I in trouble? Or like unknown caller and it's like, oh my God, did I forget to do something? Whatever. And so then I would never answer the phone. And now anytime the phone rings, I'm just like, hello. Because I'm not afraid, like whatever the consequences are on the other end of this phone call, even if they're bad consequences, like, okay. Even if I did something wrong, I did it wrong from an okay place. So I just like, I really believe in myself. So
I love that.
I'm not hiding anything. I have no shame. And it's not like I was a closet drinker either. It's not like, oh, I was hiding my drinking. I just really, really respect myself. And so I go into all these interactions expecting other people to respect me too. It's just like, it's my default. And that's great because some people, that's what it takes for them to respect you. Some people, that's the tipping point, going in and saying like, I expect you to respect me. And then there are so many people who already do respect you. It's just the lens that you are seeing it through, right? You're like, if you're feeling insecure, you assume people don't like you, right? You go in there like, oh, I don't think that person likes me. And it's like, do you like you? And now that I like me, I assume people like me. And if they don't, I'm like, excellent. Nothing is for everyone. Like, that's not a problem. Like, I'm not out here trying to be chicken, like the basic meal that you can give to anyone at a wedding and it's safe. Like, that's cool. Like, I'll be the weird meat that's not for everyone, but those who like me will like me a lot. And I am so okay with that because I'm one of the people who like me a lot. So,
Wow.
yeah. So it's just like, yeah, I'm not ashamed of myself.
How do you think you went from starting to care for yourself, pay attention to yourself, give yourself what you need, release alcohol? How did that go to this type of
Yeah.
power and self-love?
Gradually,
Yeah.
one drop at a time.
Mm.
Yeah. And it was watching the days pile up. I love it. I got into journaling. So I journal every single morning now. And like there's nighttime gratitude. Sorry, my tummy's growling, which is probably useless for the podcast. I'm still human, listeners. The longer I went doing something kind for myself and the fact that I framed it like that as like, oh, this is an act of self-love. And that was the decision that was made from the beginning. This is not an act of deprivation. This is a choice stemming from self-love. And I loved myself a little bit every day for that. And I reflected on it every day. And I chose it with that frame. And you really start to believe it. You know, you tell yourself that you love yourself every day. And if you act in accordance with that, if you make choices that are in alignment with loving yourself, you truly start to believe it. It's crazy that it takes a while to believe it.
Mm-hmm.
Why isn't loving myself just my
Mm-hmm.
default? But it is not.
Mm.
So that's incredible. I wonder what point it happened. And it's not like I'm great every day either. Like I have ups and downs, but they're honest ups and downs. And they're ones that I know are worth inquiring into. I'm more aware of my cycle now. This I love
Mm-hmm.
because I've
Yeah.
chosen to
Yeah.
specialize in like, how is my mood? How is my energy? Like what are the things that I'm feeling, peaks and troughs, and accepting that those are natural, whether it's seasons of life or phases of your menstrual cycle or conflicts that you're in, ups and downs at work, whatever it is, that everything is cyclical in nature and like you just have the confidence to ride it out. Perfect. And know that like this is temporary. This isn't who I am. I'm not what I'm feeling today. And all that time examining it and trying to like put a name to what I was feeling, let it be a thing outside of me. When it's just like, oh, I feel bad, that's me feeling. And it's like, no. There are some specific things I'm experiencing. I'm going to identify the external stimuli that are potentially causing or contributing to those feelings. And then I will rectify them if I can, or I will accept that they are things outside of my control. And I'm going to let it go. And I am just going to stay in the small bubble that is me and what I can control. So it's been incredible to draw a smaller circle around myself and to say that this is me. Well, this stuff isn't me, so it doesn't concern me. I can let that go, or I can learn to live with it, or put effort into changing it. But that ultimately, I am my number one advocate and my number one expert on myself, and my number one concern and my number one priority. So sobriety's been choosing to put myself first every day and not really worrying about how it was going to impact other people. Because weirdly, me getting sober hasn't had well, I'm glad it's planted a seed for you. And like, I think it's made me a nicer person, but I didn't get to have that like, oh, my relationship was on the rocks and I got sober and I saved it. You know, I don't get to have that story. I'm probably a pain for some of my friends, you know, it's like, they don't call me to go for a drink anymore.
Yeah.
Like, you know, some,
You probably make people feel quite uncomfortable.
it's possible.
Yeah.
And that's hard. So some friendships have
Yeah, I can imagine.
dimmed, but that's okay.
Yeah.
That's other people, and things are seasonal, even friendships, right? They're not around forever. But I'm around forever, or my version of forever will always have me in it, however much time I have, right? And so this should be the only relationship that I really prioritize. So I wouldn't, if my husband asked me to give up reading, I would say, well, that's an outrageous request. And I'm going to be,
Can you just How many books?
Hello. I like to read 200 to 300 books a year. And like I love to read. It is
And
probably
we're talking like thick, big,
oh yeah, like books.
crunchy books.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah.
Only a few of them are Dr. Seuss. Like most of them are like pretty serious. Oh yeah, like rereading the classics. God, I'll read just about anything, but God, I love to read. And so my husband will sometimes be like, well, like, what if you had to choose between me and books? And I'm like, well, first of all, if you ask me to choose, then you're a bad person. So you're less like valuable as a choice. But I'm like, I see what you're saying. And you would have to tell me stories every day for the rest of my life. But like, if there's a scenario, like gun to your head, this is what you have to do. But I do not feel that way about alcohol. If Sean was like, wouldn't you have a drink for me? I'd be like, enjoy divorce, baby. Because like, no, this is... It's very interesting, especially as someone who's known me as long as you have. You know that reading books is a part of my identity. It is written inside me. Unintentional pun. But I would give up reading before I would give up sobriety now. This feels like it has subtly woven itself into every aspect of my life. None of them largely, none of them loudly or brightly, but it's a subtle little thread that weaves through every single thing that I do, and to its betterment.
Isn't that true? Like that subtlety? Like, isn't that true for everything good and true and real? You know? Wow.
Yeah.
Air.
If someone is out there being like, ooh, alcohol, cannabis, coffee, social media, workouts, what do you think is a litmus test to, is there a litmus test for you?
The perfect first litmus test is, okay, everyone listening, give it up for a month. Like starting right now. No negotiations. Don't tell me, oh, I have a wedding to go to later this month or nothing. If you have started negotiations, okay, you're definitely doing a month now, okay? Like we might be talking about 2 months. If your instinct when you hear like, you want to give up wine for a month is like, I could. I don't want to. If there's any clench, if there's any hold on, if the idea of giving it up for a month makes you feel a little tense, a little sweaty, anything, you absolutely need to do it. Okay, so that's step one. If you are having that reaction, then you do a little investigation. Okay, like why don't I want to give it up for a month? What am I going to be missing? What am I scared of missing out on? Write that down. Okay, how can I get that? What's another route to getting that thing instead? Like, well, like what am I going to do without my 4 o'clock glass of wine? Okay, what are you going to do? Brainstorm some options. But if the idea of giving it up for a month is at all concerning, you got to do it. So
I love that. Erin, this has been so enlightening. I'm wondering if in the show notes beneath this, we could actually put some of your favorite books on this subject if people want to dive in.
I've got books. I've got a couple of podcasts that I would recommend, whether specific episodes or just in general. And I would love to share some of those resources. And if there's any listeners who are like, oh, I actually have follow-up questions, I would be very open to. Please have my email. I'll put it in the show notes.
That's so nice of you.
I would love to answer any questions anyone had because it's the best gift I've ever gotten. And it's incredibly powerful to be the person who gave yourself your own best gift. Autonomy. What a sweet thing. And I truly wish it for everyone. So
can you throw out a few just like books right off the top of your head right now that are like, yes, this?
Okay. One of the reasons we're going to call this episode Sober Curiosity and Self-Care is Ruby Warrington wrote Sober Curious. And she was the first person who introduced me to the idea of giving up drinking without having a drinking problem. Just trying it. Because first of all, if you can't give it up, you do have a drinking problem. And if you don't have a drinking problem, then why don't you want to give it up? This is what we're curious about. This is the question we ask. So it's just like, okay, I'm going to look into it. So it's for people like me who have no rock bottom, not even a high bottom, you know? Really like that one. I liked the Gabor Mate in the Realm of Hungry Ghosts, Dopamine Nation by Anna Lemke. I love reading Quitlet. Laura McCowan's We Are the Luckiest. It's stories about women. That really did it for me. And it's women approximately in my age group talking about their experience of getting sober. And they tell it very story like. The Sober Diaries by Claire Poole. Oh, I apparently have too many recommendations. So I can just dump them in the show notes. Awesome. But I do want to caution people that sometimes when you read Quit Lit, you see somebody's story and things got like a little dark for them, and then you say like, oh, I'm not there. So that's why I love starting with Ruby Warrington, Sober Curious, because it's really just about like, hey, like, are you feeling your best?
Yeah.
And it's the most positive. So there's no room there to give you a point of contrast and say like, oh, well, I'm doing better than that, so I shouldn't give up drinking. So I love that one. And I really loved Dopamine Nation because it taught me how my brain works. And if we are not privileging our brains and our brain health above everything, that's who you are. You know, I think about that a lot. If you took my brain and put it in your head and yours and put it in mine, which one of us is Taryn? Right? Like, this body's not going home to your children and your husband. Right. I won't feed them. I won't be nice to them. I'm in there. This girl's going downtown. She can go read a book. Okay. So like, now this is Taryn.
Yeah.
So the brain is what makes you who you are. So I just wanted to start prioritizing my brain.
Wow.
Yeah. Sorry, we keep trying to wrap up and then I keep rambling about more things. There's too much. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, you've given us. Okay, I want to end this session with what's your golden nugget? So what is your?
I have some choices to make.
Yeah.
I have some choices to make when you were saying if you clench a little, if you start going, oh, but, and I did that. I did that for a couple of things. And so, you know, and like your statement, nope, there's no ifs, ands, or it's just it's a month. And so I'm like, oh, so am I about to do a month? I think I'm about to do a month of a couple things, but I don't entirely want to in this moment. And so I'm feeling some resistance, but I'm also feeling like, your energy and everything you're saying, you make me feel like you lit me up inside. And you're touching on some things that like, when I am devoted to myself in all of these little corners, nothing makes me feel better. I feel so powerful. I feel so happy. My life gets better. I feel proud of myself. And you're touching on this thing in all these other places. So I'm like, why wouldn't I do that? I know I know you're right. I know it's true. I know it's powerful. But I'm like, okay, so I need to have a moment with myself after this conversation. And I need to be brave, I guess, and adventurous. And trust that, here's what I have to trust. Here's my goal. I have to trust that there absolutely are ways to give myself the things that I'm truly yearning for in a more, in just like a better, wholer, realer, healthier way. And I'm not actually going to lose something. I think I have to reassure myself of that and put some energy into making sure I fill my real needs so I can be brave enough to try this month.
I love that for you. And the fact that you've already had that experience with sugar, so you know the basic prototype, you've got the roadmap, you know the feelings.
Oh, yeah.
And you know why it's worth
I think I've gone through withdrawals of a lot of things. Let's be honest. Humans, apps, substances. I've done it. And somehow different things come back in. But I think like, I love what you're saying about there isn't a problem. I don't have any problems. My life is wonderful. And I don't even know. I can't even name negative effects right now of whatever substances. However, I'm having that feeling of like releasing them, and like I agree with you. I believe you. That means something. And so I think taking something and that the way you trust yourself, who doesn't want more of that? Who doesn't want more of that?
I might be addicted to that.
I'm like, you know what you have? I want more of that.
Yeah.
So I think this is worth it.
Oh, I love that for you.
Yeah, me too.
I can't wait to hear how it goes.
Okay. Okay. For you.
Everything you just said.
Yeah.
Yes. And my biggest takeaway is kind of like piggybacking up what you just said was around trusting yourself. I think that was like a really heart-opening moment for me in this conversation of even beyond beyond this conversation of sobriety is like, oh, in what ways do I not trust myself? Like the confidence you have in yourself and the trust you have in yourself beyond anyone else. There's something about that I want to examine more within myself. There's something there that really landed.
I'm so glad.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much for letting me come talk about this. I'm very passionate about this, and I hope even if one person who listens thinks, okay, I'm going to give myself the gift of a month and think of it as a gift instead of a deprivation of a month, then we all are such capable human beings who can make informed decisions, but we need to make sure we're informed. And we deserve that.
Thank you, Erin.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, I love you guys.
Love you.
What do we need to do now?
That's it. Okay.
Thank you so much for listening. For more information, you can visit our website at www.themindrebel.com or visit us on Instagram or Facebook at the_mind_rebel_academy. And these links can all be found in the show notes below. If you like this episode, we would be so grateful if you shared it with your fellow bold dreamers.